So there's been a lot of disgusting stuff that's been said. Everybody's lost their minds with this Russian invasion of Ukraine. I've seen bad takes from all over the map, from every ideological perspective you can imagine. People are just shoving their heads directly in their anuses. So, but we've somehow raised the stakes even more here. We're now at the justifying killing children portion of the war now. Take a look at this video.
Dmitry, the Ukrainians, to a man and a woman and a child that I've spoken to, don't want you here.
Well, why didn't Americans go home from Iraq in 2003? I'm sorry, but we are not living in paradise.
Well, it was a disaster. No one is justifying that war. Do the sins of the Americans justify the sins of the Russians committed today?
Yes, of course they do. Yes, of course they do, because great powers behave as great powers.
You tell that to the child. You tell that to that 6-year-old kid in Mariupol who's dead now.
How many
This is
civilians
nonsense, Dmitry.
No, I'm sorry. How many children did die in Belgrade when it was shelled by NATO? How many children did die in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, which remains a black hole? Come on. I mean, we do not share.
Does that make it okay for you today? That's the question.
So think about what you just saw. The official position of the Russian government is, we're going to criticize America when they do war crimes, kill innocent civilians, kill children, because that's immoral and wrong and unethical. But we get a pass when we kill civilians, when we kill women and children. I mean, the argument is quite literally, it's okay when we do it, it's bad when America does it. No, any reasonable person with objective standards, with principles, says it's terrible when America does it, and it's terrible when Russia does it. I generally don't like the dialogue with whataboutism, because oftentimes you make a valid point and it's just swatted aside as like, well, you're just changing the conversation. If you bring up another example, that's not necessarily whataboutism, but when you use the thing to dismiss your own wrongdoing, that absolutely is whataboutism. There's no other term for it. So look, it went right to America bad. And it's like, okay, granted, but now you're bad too, by your own logic. But they don't want to apply the logic. They want to exempt themselves from the logic. Man, and we've been crystal clear on this show, you guys know that. When America commits war crimes, I'm screaming about it at the top of my lungs. And honestly, I'm screaming about it even more because it's my government. So I have some nominal control over it. And I feel responsible for what my government is doing with my money in my name. So whether it's what's going on in Yemen, with people are starving. Millions of people are starving. In Afghanistan, the sanctions are starving millions of people. We're aiding and abetting a genocide in Yemen. We're occupying Syria right now and jacking their oil, and we're open about that fact. Trump talked about that. Biden has thankfully reduced the drone war a lot, but when we're at the peak of the drone war, we're killing 90% innocent civilians. We were just bombing Somalia the other day as Russia was invading Ukraine, and nobody talked about it. We're starving Venezuela with crippling sanctions. The list goes on and on. We could talk about this all day. I'll criticize that vociferously, but I'm criticizing that because it's wrong in principle, which means I'm going to criticize it if it's the Russian government doing it too. I mean, he was asked, do the sins of the Americans justify the sins of the Russian government? And his response was, and I quote, of course they do. So they did it, it's bad. We do it, it's good. It's permissible. It's acceptable. No, it's not permissible in either instance. And let me explain something to you guys. This hurts them because the United States, we have mastered the art of lying and sophistry. So the United States goes out there, and as we are committing war crimes and doing evil things, we cloak it in virtuousness. And we say, like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. We're just trying to bring freedom and democracy to the world. We're just trying to uphold human rights. We're just being the world policeman. We're just, doing the ethical thing, the courageous thing. So the United States, in our propaganda campaigns, we try to, put a veneer of civility and respectability over our war crimes. Now, that's bullshit and that's misleading, but it also dupes a lot of people into thinking, hey, maybe that is what they're doing. What Russia's doing is just a raw power play here. They're not even trying to present a face to the world that's like, you know, we're holier than thou, we're virtuous, we're doing the right thing. They're open about the fact. They're just being flat honest about the fact, like, yeah, we're committing war crimes, and I don't care about your criticism of it because you guys did too, so it's okay now when we do it. I mean, the guy's literally asking about a dead child, a child who died as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the guy's like, a lot of kids died elsewhere. Why are we talking about our kid, you know, this kid dying? Because you guys are responsible for it. The Russian government is responsible for it, and it just happened. That's why we're talking about it. That's why we're talking about it. But no, he says, do the sins of the Americans justify the sins of the Russian government? And I quote, of course they do. Of course they do. So it's just, it's an argument on the side of lawlessness. It's an argument on the side of international law being useless. It should be discarded. And it's nonsense, man. It's nonsense. Look, I get it. The American government is hypocritical. Like, of course, we're going to focus on the evil doings of our official enemy states. And we shouldn't. We should focus on the evil doings of our allies, too, and ourselves. I mean, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the list goes on and on with how terrible they are. But they're using this to deflect and obfuscate from very legitimate criticism of what they're doing. And at the end of the day, the discourse you just saw was plain and simple. I'm going to rationalize and justify dead children, killing children. Don't know how they sleep at night, man. Don't know how they sleep at night. Every time we talk about these conflicts, guys, everybody falls into a trap of like, let me argue for a side in it. And in some instances, yeah, like when you're talking about the U.S. and Russia versus, or the Soviet Union at the time versus Nazi Germany. Yeah, okay, arguing for a side, one can understand where you'd come from in that instance. But also, the more important part is, it's the principles that matter, man. It's the principles. And so, even in World War II, like, here's something we all should have criticized: the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. Like, even though in that war, I'm on the side of the U.S. and Russia versus Nazi Germany, also, hey, probably shouldn't have massacred those innocent civilians. Duh. Right? So you have to think, in every conflict, you have to think first and foremost about international law and humanity and upholding objective standards. And you can't say when the side I want to win commits war crimes, it doesn't count because I want them to win. That's just sloppy thinking. That's gross thinking. It's thinking that should have died hundreds of years ago. But nonetheless, here we are. And that is, you know, that's one of the grossest videos I've ever seen. The Russian government might want to reel this guy in a little bit because he's one of the worst propagandists. He's not gaining any people over to their side with stuff like this. I mean, flat out justifying killing children. Doesn't get any lower than that. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.